Okay, I can do that. Okay, great. Thank you. You too. All right, y'all. This should be it. Okay. Everybody ready? For those of you who don't know me, I'm Shannon Sharp. I'm one of the managing brokers here at EXP and the managing broker for Lake Norman. We also have Michelle O'Shell here today. She's one of your CCSs and managing brokers. So we are going to teach this new Skyslope and how to get paid. So everyone, please bear with me because this is a new format, new class. As most of you know, ZipForm stopped integrating with Skyslope.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's just, yeah, go ahead and get that out there. So I kind of had to revamp the class and how we were going to do things. Also, we have kind of paired up with payment processing to put a little bit more focus on how you get paid and integrating the two classes. If we're going to take 2 hours for a class, I'm hoping this helps cut it down a bit. But if we're going to take the 2 hours for a class, let's get everything in. Let's make sure you know how to use Skyslope, the things we're looking for in CCS, and how to get you paid. So I have more of a kind of a slide format. The way I did it before was a little more interactive. If you have your laptops and you want to pull up Skyslope as we go along, we can use some of your laptops to work on and kind of collaborate together if we need to go over things. And if you wouldn't mind, if you don't have a laptop with you, to share your neighbors. So let's go over some EXP lingo. A CDA or a DA. That is a commission disbursement authorization. It's the piece of paper that allows you to get paid at closing. And it'll either be a single DA or a split DA. When we say single DA, that's one check to EXP, and there's instructions on where to mail it. Let me emphasize that there are specific addresses that your checks are supposed to go to, and that address is on the DA. Attorneys, as great as they are, sometimes do not read. So we need to sometimes point out, and when I was doing, transaction coordinating and things like that, I'd send the DA to the attorney myself, and I say, here's the DA from EXP. This is what you're supposed to do, and this is the address you need to send it to. So it kind of brings it to the front of the paralegal's mind or to the front of the attorney or whoever it is that's paying you. So a single check is one check to EXP. You upload a copy of your check, a copy of your closing disclosure, and we will get you paid. That check then comes into our PO box, gets processed, but you don't have to wait to get paid as long as you have a copy of that check.
Shannon, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
So, brand new agent, I have my first closing this Monday. It's a personal sale,
Mhm.
but I'm still in the mentor program. So, a check needs to go to EXP for my personal sale fee plus the expand program plus my mentor. But only one check needs to go to EXP.
We'll have to talk about that one off. But it depends on if you got a split check DA or a single DA.
Okay. And then how do I figure that out?
It would be uploaded to, we'll go over it. It will be uploaded to your checklist in Skyslope. Under closing documents, there's a section that says closing disbursement, and it will be there. It also gets emailed to you. So the payment processors say, hey, here's your DA. It's also provided to the attorney email address that you put into Skyslope.
When is that done?
It's done after your file is approved at this point, and a couple days before closing. So it should be in the next few days. Yeah. Payment processing is a little farther behind than we are. Do you know what?
48.
Are they 48 to 72? Okay. They're a little farther behind them than we are in CCS. We're in active real-time review right now. So we want to give them some time, but typically 2 days before closing is the benchmark there, unless we're really behind.
Shannon, I was going to mention, I handle closings, that just all the time. And one of the things, some attorneys are now used to EXP. A lot of them are. Some are not.
Yeah.
Some won't issue double checks. Some will. So I tend to, right after due diligence, I email them a sample copy of a DA and then highlight it and say, do you have any questions? This is what we do. Is it okay? You know, and they've been more cooperative.
Mhm.
You know, if it's a
Yeah.
firm we aren't used to or whatever.
Yeah, if you have a transaction coordinator, closing coordinator, or if you're just doing a lot of the closing stuff, it's great to communicate with the attorneys up front, if you can do that, and they will. And typically, if you ask them, do you wire funds, and the answer is no, single check. Yeah, we don't. If they don't wire funds, they're probably not separating checks either. That's a pretty good rule of thumb. In the western part of the state, in the mountains, none of them know what EXP is. None of them have any idea what a CDA is.
What a CD is?
A CDA.
Oh, yeah.
None of them wire funds. Shannon Pyatt is up there and just growing the whole, Asheville and Marion area. And so none of them, it's very funny. None of them know. So it's like in different areas, as we expand and as we grow, we're going to have to teach these things to the attorneys and see at some point, hey, you're going to see this more and more. So maybe you should adjust in one fashion or another.
And Shannon,
Yeah.
I'm in that really.
Oh, hey. Yeah. No, you're good. That's what I'm here for.
I just got off of TV status a month ago.
Okay.
I have not had any transactions yet.
Okay.
So some of this stuff's probably over my head. So I'm gonna
That's fine. Just take notes, and then when you have questions, when you're doing it is when you'll really kind of get into it, and we'll be able to help walk you through that.
Okay.
Broker approval is something that we do as CCSs. It's not a managing broker task, but the managing brokers have given us the ability to say, okay, you can approve a file. The second level to that is Michelle and I are MBs, so we have a second level of authority to say yes or no, this goes or doesn't go on this file. But broker approved, that's what it means. That the CCS doesn't, and the CCS has the ability to approve your files. A CCS is a contract compliance specialist, and a PPS is a payment processing specialist. We're kind of a transaction management team, is for the transactions department is what we're kind of rounding out to be. It's kind of coming down to a state level. So at the end of this, I have the new email address that we've created. So we're really trying to streamline the communication, and that email box is being monitored in real time as well. All right. Moving on. Okay, the types of transactions that you put into Skyslope, there's a listing, there's sales, leases and rentals, referrals, BPOs, and then miscellaneous transactions like retainer fees, marketing fees, and termination fees. So I'm not going to go, we'll go further into some of these things, but I'm just going to touch on miscellaneous transaction fees real quick. If you charge a retainer fee or a marketing fee up front before you do anything, or if it terminates, that fee must be run through EXP. If you charge for reimbursement of listing photos for a specific amount or having the home measured, and you ask at termination of a listing that they reimburse you for those fees, and you actually have a bill of sale to prove you're being reimbursed, we don't want in the middle of that. So it's only if you're saying, well, if you cancel, I'm charging you a $550 fee. Okay, that's fine, but it's going to be run through EXP and subject to your split. A retainer fee on a buyer agent side. Any of those things are going to be run through EXP, but if it is a specific reimbursal, we don't care. We don't
If you
want
have a
to.
receipt for it, it doesn't have to go through EXP.
Yeah. So if it's just a reimbursement and you can prove that it's a reimbursement and not a commission or not a fee that should be run through the company, just make sure you have proof. We're not checking for that, but if it were to come up and someone says, well, she charged a $500 termination fee and it's not being run through EXP, and you can say, well, I charge $500. I get charged $500 for photos, and so this is what I'm asking them to reimburse me for. Okay, then that's fine. All right. All right, so this is your Skyslope dashboard. Up at the top left is the EXP logo. If you ever get lost, click on that EXP logo and it'll take you back to this home screen and you'll be safe and sound again. This is what my dashboard looks like. I'm gonna pull this back down. Your guys' dashboard is gonna look just a little different. And it's not gonna have all the things across the top, but this is what we have. You've got managed transactions, managed listings, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
DigiSign, and working documents, and cancel contracts, and access archives. Those are the most important ones that you're going to run into there. Up in the top right-hand corner is your name. It's the drop-down menu. You can access your settings and add alternate email IDs, which we'll go over shortly. Right now, actually. If you have a transaction coordinator, closing coordinator, or you don't want your notifications that we've reviewed your file to go into your EXP email, you can add an alternate email ID here to the right. You have to keep your EXP one on the left as your main one, but you can either add a TC email or another email to get your notifications in. So when we go and review your file and you get that notification that says this is what we still need from your file, it will go to both emails. And it's a great way to keep your transaction coordinator in the loop. Again, that's if you go to your name and go to your settings.
My time zone actually has specific, but it won't let me change it here. Is there somewhere else I'm supposed to change it?
It has it on your Skyslope.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That may be standard because the account's out of Washington. So it may say that for all of ours. So creating a new listing or a sale transaction. So when you create a listing, that means it's a listing going on the market, not under contract. Whether you sell it that day before you can put it in MLS or not, you have to create the listing first. Once you create the listing and then it goes under contract, there's a button to click to turn it into a transaction. And then if you have only the sale side, then you would create a transaction and you would start by clicking those buttons. You can also do this by going into manage listings or manage transactions and clicking on the green buttons to create them. Okay. This is so hard to see with this thing here. Can I hide it? There we go.
These slides.
That's what I was just gonna
I
ask.
can.
Okay, or do we need to write all this down?
No, I can share the slides. And let's do, can you do a sign-in sheet? Everybody could just sign in. That way I can send it to you if you're here. What we don't want to do is send the program out to everyone and then no one attends. So when you're setting up your file, there are a couple of important things. Anything with a red asterisk is required. But there's a caveat here. The MLS number is required, but if you don't have an MLS number, it's fine. Just put in 0.
When do you get an MLS number?
Once you input it into the MLS itself.
Okay, so you have to input it here and input it.
Yes. Yes. So you would probably put the listing in MLS first and then start to upload your paperwork here.
Oh.
Yeah, so this is just for your paperwork. Making sure that the sales price is correct, the closing date, and then you have checklist type and the type of sale. So the checklist type is going to tell us what kind of checklist you need to input all of your paperwork. The type of sale is going to tell us whether it's a listing or a sale. Now, if it's a listing and you're creating a transaction for that, we'll end up finding out because it won't look right and it will get kicked back. But if you're doing a sale, you would do the type of the sale, and then the checklist type, is it a buyer side only? Is it dual agency? If it was a listing, you could choose dual agency. There's different options there. New construction, listing side only, buyer side only, dual both sides, referral, rental, lot, and land. The type can be a sale, listing, sold, both a listing and a sale, dual, or other, and referral. So when you're entering a referral in here, say you don't have the address, you're just going to fill in as much information as you can. But for the street number, you can put REF. And then for the street name, you could put the person's last name and set it up some way. If you have the address, use the address. But then you would select other referral for type, and then you would select referral as the checklist type. Same for rental, you would put other referral and then select rental. And it'll bring up the right checklist types. Here.
Check type is, say for rental would be rental and then the type would be other.
Yeah, type is other / referral. It's pretty vague right there, but it's just other referral. But for checklist type, you should be able to select rental or referral or BPO. It breaks it down, yes.
Unless you're collecting a fee for the referral, there's no need to do that, because if you're working a referral, eventually you get a transaction, put it in, right? So you'd only put in a referral if you're working for a fee.
If it's an outgoing referral, if you give a referral to someone at KW and you're expecting a referral check to come in, then you would put in a referral fee. If you give a referral to another EXP agent, you don't have to do anything. They just need to upload the referral agreement into your checklist or into their checklist. And if you're the one working the referral, then you want to put it into your checklist so we can pay the other EXP agent. If you got a referral and you're working it, you upload the referral agreement and that company's W-9 so we can pay them. Sorry, I still have a little cough going on. All right. If you make changes to the closing date, please make sure you're going back and updating the closing date here. That's what will keep your file active and making sure that everyone gets to take a look at your file correctly and that you don't have 10 missing documents and we think the closing date is today when it's actually a month from now, and that's why you don't have any documents. So making sure the sales price and the closing date stay updated are very important. Let's see. If you make any changes, make sure after you make them in Skyslope, you make sure you have any amendments. So if your closing date gets pushed out past that 14-day grace period that we have, make sure you have an amendment showing that. If you have a price change, make sure you have an amendment signed by all parties showing that because the girls will be looking for that. On the next page, when you go through this, you're just going to click next or submit and it'll take you to the next step. You're going to put in the seller information, the buyer information, and then the title escrow attorney. There's 3 sections. It'll start with the title, and then if you scroll down, it'll eventually get you to attorney. In North Carolina, we typically only use attorneys, so you only need to fill out this one section. Even if you stick it in the first section as the attorney, nobody's going to say anything. But that email address right there is the email address the DA sent to, so you want to make sure that that email address is absolutely correct for the right paralegal or the right attorney, depending on who's handling the file. So we want to make sure that's correct, because when they send the DA out, it's going to go to you and it's going to go to that attorney. And then again, I would just double check with the attorney once you get it and make sure they got it and they understand. Because it's not just a hobby. If you go to the next page and you hit submit, you get to the commission tab. And this is the tab where you want to make sure that your commission is correct. You want to make sure that your commission is entered as it's being received either per your listing agreement or per the MLS. If you have any referrals, you can use this additional commission breakdown details box. You guys can write in there, and you can say, okay, I have a referral fee to Annette or Michael or whoever, and you can put the percentage and then upload the referral agreement on the next page, which is the checklist. If you want to pay a transaction coordinator here, if you get a split DA, you can do that. You can put their fee, their name. We just need to have their license number to make sure they're a licensed entity. If they are not a licensed coordinator or admin, then they cannot be paid at the closing table. You have to pay them. All right. North Carolina sale checklist. These are the required fields. There are some one-off situations which we'll go over later that kind of deviate from this, but basically you're going to need your buyer agency showing your commissions, MLS sheet, professional services disclosure, the realist tax card and deed, and if applicable, the FHA VA addendum, lead-based paint, any referrals and W-9s, addendas, terminations for sale by owner and unrepresented seller forms like 150. If for some reason something in there is not, you don't have it, say it's new construction and you chose the wrong checklist and it's asking you for a tax card. Is that right? Tax card.
Yeah, realist.
You just type in the comment box next to it, this is new construction, I don't have one, or not applicable, or some, put some kind of note. It's okay that it's not there. So when we're reviewing the file, then we know there's some special one-off situation there.
And we're still training new people, so if you get it kicked back to you again, just say per Shannon or Michelle, it's not needed. That way they know that it's not needed. We process like 150 to 200 files a day, each of us in that range. So sometimes we miss the comments, or we're just so attuned to sending it back for something that it may not have clicked for us. So if you get it sent back, just reply back nicely and say, it's not needed.
Nicely.
Please, yes, nicely, please.
Well, yeah. Let's leave it.
Just a reminder that documents need to be uploaded to Skyslope within 2 business days per EXP or 3 calendar days for the commission, whichever is less. All right. A North Carolina listing checklist on the other side of that has the listing agreement and requires measurements and advertising. The measurements have to be within a 5% variance of an MLS versus your actual measurements. This is an MLS requirement. It's not a commission requirement. It's an MLS requirement. So if the house is listed in the MLS, it has to be measured by yourself or a professional that you hire. And it has to be within a 5% variance. Now, the caveat to that is if you list it at 1,200 square feet, but it actually measures for 1,400 square feet, we're not going to kick it back to you because nobody's going to complain about getting 200 extra square feet for what they agreed to pay for 1,200 square feet initially. But if it's listed at 1,400 square feet and it measures only 1,200 square feet, then we're going to kick it back to you. Now, if it's not under contract, you can just go in and adjust the listing and it's fine. If it is under contract, you're then going to have to, we're going to have to make you go to your buyer on the other side and that other agent and say, I misrepresented. This is actually the measurements. Here they are. Is your buyer still good with this? I mean, you put yourself into a big liability there. So you want to try to make sure that the listing measurements are accurate. So if you're going and using tax record measurements and then saying, I'll measure it later, don't do that. It's not good practice to do that. Go ahead, get the house measured, get your photos done all at one time, and just then make it live. And account for that.
So
Yes.
if the house was previously listed at maybe 600 square feet more,
Mhm.
and then when you measure it,
Mhm.
it's 600 square feet less
Mhm.
because they didn't double count for the 2-story foyer.
Mhm.
And the tax records are wrong and that whole thing.
Mhm.
My measurements are right, the MLS is right. Do I care about?
Nope.
Okay.
You don't care about what another agent did before you, as long as you did it correctly. Yep. Because then someone else could list the house in a year from now, and their measurements could go back to the 600 extra square feet, even though you verified it was correct. Another appraiser can come out and say, but if you hired a professional, you're basing it off of what they're saying. So then you have that documentation. Yeah. All right. Oh, and advertising. Advertising, as long as it has eXp Realty on it somewhere. So social media, hashtag eXp Realty is completely sufficient. And it's clear that you're a realtor broker / realtor, whichever you want to put it. If you're making ads on your personal Facebook page, we're not going to dive into all this, but you need to make it clear that you're a broker presenting a home for sale, even on your personal page. As long as it has those two things, yes.
We're not gonna dive into it unless it's brought to our attention, like we're not out surfing your Facebook
Right.
pages. But if you friend us on Facebook and we see something that
Yes.
shouldn't be done, we're definitely gonna address it. And there are other agents out there that are surfing the net, especially for us.
Yes.
Right now, eXp is under fire with, because we're the new kids on the block, you know? So you just have to be very aware of that and make sure that you're doing it properly. If you have any questions, reach out to your MD or any of us in the broker world.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. If we see it, we will say something, but we're not out there actively pursuing your personal Facebook pages.
In all your spare time.
nobody.
Right. If you post something, if you have a business Facebook page, then that's what you should be screenshotting to us and uploading into that section for advertising. The whole idea is that they know that you're a broker and they know we're eXp. Those are the two big things that we care about. Okay, listing sold checklist. So once you get a listing under contract, there's a button, and I don't know why it's cut off, but it's like right here. And it says accepted contract. So you'll click that accepted contract button, go back through the first steps, enter your sales information, what's the sales price, closing date, all that stuff. Go through it like you would a regular sale, and then it'll bring you back here and you'll have two different checklists. Actually, you'll have three. You'll have where it says sales documentation, you'll have sales documentation, closing documentation, and listing documentation. So there'll be three different sections there. So on this part, you're just going to need that, and I didn't update the pages, but page 14 now of the offer to purchase, the mineral oil and gas, any addendums, and if it ever terminates, then you would need the termination. And we'll talk about agent completion of file later.
What were the 3 sections again?
Sales documentation,
Mhm.
closing documentation. That is on a sale. And then if it's a listing, you'll add listing documentation. And it'll be in that order. This is the closing document section. DAs are typically emailed to the attorney within 3 to 5 business days. They're going through another transition, so I think we're back at like 2 days before closing. But typically 3 to 5 days before closing is their goal. Split DAs for files that are broker approved only. So Michelle and I and Lori and Heidi and now Andrea will go through and review your files, and then if everything's okay, you'll see approved in our initials. And then we internally flip it to a status called broker approved, and that tells payment processing, hey, you can give them a split check now. Don't upload anything in the closing document section until you have final signed docs. We don't want the prelim CD or the prelim HUD. We don't need to see any of that. The only thing that needs to go here is the final signed CD, final signed HUD, or final signed Alta. And then the third one is the commission check. Also in the copy of the DA slot, that number 1 under closing documents, never put anything there. If for some reason you know that your attorney is not going to do split checks, they're not going to pay you at closing, they'll only do 1 check to EXP, you could put a note in that copy of DA and you could say single check only, please. Make sure you check your CDA prior to closing and make sure it's correct. And also bring a copy with you to closing. As many times as you can tell them, as much as it may annoy them, they don't always get it right and they forget. And they're just so used to copying checks and sending them out or having them wait for pickup that they're just going to make 1 check to EXP if they aren't reminded to do so. I keep seeing more things before I move on. The mailing address for EXP's check, it should always, always, always go to the PO box in Charlotte. There's an overnight address and there's a regular PO box for regular mail. What happens is the attorneys end up sending them to Perimeter Parkway or to my Langtree office, and I have to go chase checks. Matt's mail from Perimeter Parkway comes to my office, and then I get it all and take it. Raleigh's gets a couple of checks, but we get like 20 checks a week, at least. So that's a lot. So when I see it coming from a particular attorney, I'm trying to reach out to them if I have contacts and say, hey, can you please send this to the PO box, because it's very helpful. So if you ever have questions about where to go, you can reach out to the transactions department. Especially if they hand you the check and you're like, what do I do with it now? If you have questions about where it goes, just reach out to us and I'll give you that contact information in a bit. All right. Files with special circumstances. This is your vacant lot and land listings, your new construction, REO, foreclosures, short sales, agent owner, properties, assignments, contracts, and wholesaling. This is on my Skyslope cheat sheet that you can find on Workplace. And I'll show you where you guys can find that later. But let's just go over a couple of things. On the vacant lot and land, you don't need a residential property disclosure, but if there's an HOA, you need an owner's association disclosure. A mineral oil and gas is not required, but it is suggested if at all possible. Why do you think that is? You're selling land. Mm-hmm. Mineral oil and gas is land. So if you can get it, let's get it. Let's cover our clients as a precaution. But we're not going to require it, and we're not going to kick back your file if you don't have it. New construction, make sure that you have a co-broker addendum or the confirmation of compensation 770 if it's not listed in the MLS. So if you get a buyer under contract on new construction that isn't on the MLS, typically with your big builders, True Homes, D.R. Hortons, they're going to have a co-broker addendum that's going to be signed, but just make sure that that's how you're going to get paid. So you've got to have that. Again, the residential property disclosure and tax cards are not required for new construction. Typically, they have their own purchase contracts and they're fine. The only caveat that we want to mention that's come up in the last month or two with some of the new construction and wholesaling are assignment contracts. If it is not our offer to purchase and it is not a big builder's already approved by an attorney purchase contract, we have to know that that purchase contract was done by a North Carolina licensed attorney. Some of these contracts are very vague and they're not real specific, and you can't tell if they were drafted by an attorney or not. So if we can't tell that it's been drafted by an attorney, we're gonna ask. So if you're doing any of those deals where you're maybe selling your own new construction homes, or you're handling wholesaling properties for an investor, and they're using a bunch of crazy, I'm gonna call it crazy nonsense, we're gonna look at it and we're gonna kick it back. So please make sure that the contracts they're using are drafted by a North Carolina licensed attorney, because as realtors, we cannot use anything else. Okay. Let's see. Oh. Measurements on new construction. So if you list a new construction home and it hasn't been built yet, but you use the floor plan to put in measurements, square footage, you must then go back and measure the house once it's built and before closing, because you're still responsible for the square footage that you put in. I know it seems kind of funny, but if the builder messes up, which happens, the square footage could be wildly different. So you want to make sure you're covering your rent. Okay. REO, foreclosure, and short sale. Don't need a residential property disclosure or mineral oil and gas. Most of the times those banks or investors, they just don't have any of that information. Again, it can be written on offer to purchase or an outside company's agreements, but it has to be a North Carolina attorney who's drafted it. And if it's not offered in MLS, please use the confirmation of compensation form 770 to make sure you can get paid.
If it's lawyer drafted, they usually have it noted, so if you see your contract that doesn't have a lawyer's stamp or name on the bottom.
Typically,
Yeah.
it's logo or
Yeah,
it's at the
logo
very
or
bottom,
a name.
and then the contact information.
So if that's missing, you could research that.
If it looks like someone went to Staples and copied it out of a book, that's typically what that looks like. Agent owner disclosures. We're going to go into agent owner in a little more detail, so I'll go ahead and skip over that for now. But the assignment contracts and wholesaling. So this is where we get into a really big gray area, but you cannot do any wholesaling as the agent with you as one of the parties to the transaction, but you can represent people who are doing it. It gets really tricky. So if you have questions, just reach out to Michelle or myself, and we'd be happy to help walk you through it and make sure that you do it correctly.
Can you define wholesaling?
Do you want me to take that one?
Yep, go ahead.
So it's the we buy ugly houses people. It's typically something like that. A buyer becomes a seller because they're selling somebody else's house. So it's an assignment basically to a contract. And the end buyer is typically the wholesaler's buyer. The wholesaler becomes the seller, but then there's another seller involved because that's who's on deed. So in reality, like when we had our last conversation with Parker about it, as long as you connect all the dots for us in Skyslope and you write comments and we can fit all the pieces of the puzzle together, we're fine with it. As long as you're not a party of the transaction or a member of the LLC as a party of the transaction, because we've had a couple, and I just thought about this when you said that. We've had a couple agents recently that are members of the LLC that are, so I'm gonna have to go back today.
You just hope that it came out right.
Yeah.
Because what happens is,
if you're newer agents and you want to get into wholesaling, reach out to us and we'll see if we can't partner you with another agent that's doing a lot of wholesaling.
and doing it correctly.
And doing it correctly, yes. Because it's like commercial, it's like luxury, it's a whole nother market that you need to learn the ins and outs of it until, before you can say you're an expert at it. So,
Definitely.
Yeah.
And basically, there's this middleman who's going to make the money and take that money away from the seller. Well, if you're the middleman as a realtor, and then seller comes back and say, well, you just got 50 grand, I got screwed. You're in trouble. So we don't want any part of that. So you can't be a part of it, but you can represent people who are. All right. Splitting docs in Skyslope. So if you go, the next tab over from checklist is documents. If you go into the documents tab, It will pull in all the documents, whether you had them digisigned or you uploaded them in there. And then you can use the split feature. So you can select which documents you want and you can click split. And then on the next page, you can split out page 1 to 4 is the offer to purchase. Page 5 is the mineral oil and gas. And you can do it that way and it'll split it into 4 or 5 different documents. And it'll go right to your checklist. Alrighty. We're gonna do a quick DigiSign flow through. This is the part that's kind of different from what I've taught before. We no longer have the zip forms that integrates and we don't have this big thing to go through. So I'm just gonna briefly go over DigiSign. You click on DigiSign. The next step, you'll either click new envelope there to the right, or there will be a property down there that you can select and assign it to that property if you already have one in there. But for the sake of argument, we're going to do just a simple one. We're going to click new envelope because we're just starting a transaction. And then it'll take you, oh, I messed up, maybe, okay. Yeah. Then it's going to take you to the next page to select the property, and you're going to hit no property. So new envelope, no property. And then it's going to bring you to a place where you can upload the documents. You can upload, or if there's one already there, you can select it. And then you're going to click next. It also gives you the ability to choose a template on that documents and templates page. Mark Iafredi is working on redoing the templates for 2019, and he's putting it on the calendar that we do it every July. So that was something that Parker had done, and now that she's kind of moved into her regional manager role, we forgot. So Mark is working on that for us, and so all the templates should be updated in the next week or so. So I'll push something out. But then you click
for disclosures. All that you check boxes. Yeah, there is, and the client doesn't have to click every single one. It's like a radial option.
I'm not sure.
Isn't it leading though if you send them a DigiSign with boxes? You really should.
Yeah. I don't think that we do because of what she just said. We should not be touching that at all.
There is a template.
Yeah, you can put boxes. Why can't you put boxes in every single one? They can choose.
I guess they could choose which
It's
is
also
a lot.
explain it to them. A lot of times in my history, and it was through Dotloop, not DigiSign, but if you do that, then everything comes back initialed or checked.
Mhm.
So what I highly recommend when I'm training newer agents is email, mail, or hand deliver the disclosure forms to them, explain to them they have to be signed. And if at the very least they can send it back to me a text, a picture text, I can then convert that to a PDF and utilize that. Because in reality, we don't want to be leading in any way on those disclosures, in any way. We can't even tell our agents what to put. Even if we know the house was built in 2001, we can't tell them the house was built in 2001. You can hand them the tax card and go, this might be helpful to get some information from, but you cannot lead that lawsuit, liability and lawsuit.
Yeah.
Do not send them their DigiSign.
I would not.
I mean, you know what? We're all independent contractors. You guys do your business
Yeah.
the way you want to do it, but as a managing broker team, I would highly discourage that. And if it is in templates like that, then obviously someone was gracious in trying to
do something. Yeah.
lead you guys. I wasn't.
Yeah. I would not. I would not. I have.
It's a really messy, ugly document. Find out with that many boxes to check from.
It is. It's messy, and we really are just not supposed to touch it at all. At all. You say, Mr. Seller, I need you to fill that out.
Okay.
I cannot touch it. I cannot help you with it. If you have questions, I cannot help you. I mean, you have to say, I cannot help you. You can find answers on the tax card. You can find answers here, but I cannot help you with this form. I cannot touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Does that include the MOG?
No, you can touch that.
You can touch that. Okay. Just not
It's crazy,
Yeah.
but yeah.
So like HOA information, I can't give them the contact or the transfer fee or the phone number?
Because you know what happens? You end up being wrong. They need to call and verify. Here's the HOA phone number. You can call them and verify.
They'll get pissed off on that transfer.
I had a situation where one was incorrect. So, and it was incorrect by $100 a month
Oh,
on a $130,000 condo. So imagine that person's bill and mortgage going up by $100 a month. It almost disqualified it. And then what did the seller have to do? Come down on the price so it made it affordable for them. Or they were going to get sued. So it happens. You just don't want to touch that form. You don't want to be the one who put the wrong information on there or led them to believe that that's what it was. You just don't. Okay, so you go to the next. Everything in Skyslope either has a next or submit button, and it'll just keep taking you through. You want to add your recipients. So if you want a new recipient, you click new recipient. If it's yourself, you just go ahead and check the box. If you've already put those parties into a transaction and you selected a property, 9 times out of 10, that person's already gonna be there. Then you click next, and then you go to fill it out. You can put in a signature, initials, date and time. Writable fields are where you would place something for someone to write in themselves. If you're putting something in, I would do read only. That way nobody can change it. And then full name and checkboxes. Again, those checkboxes are tricky. Then you click send in the upper right-hand corner, and then it says, woohoo, you're done. If you have, really, this is kind of just a step-by-step thing at this point. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us, and we'll walk you through it. All right, does anyone have any questions up to this point? How are we doing on time?
You have a few minutes left.
Right, we're going to go over some agency agreements. So does anybody have any questions up to this? No? Okay. All right, listing agreement. So this stuff is going to be repetitive, but we want to make sure we get the point across. Your firm should always be eXp Realty, LLC. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, except if you have your own firm. If you have your own firm, it can be firm at eXp Realty, LLC. It cannot be powered by. It can be at or brokered by. That's it. But it always, always, always has to include eXp Realty, LLC. If you have a team name that is not a licensed entity, it does not go under firm name. You're not a licensed entity, therefore you are not a firm on the contract. And it's fine. You can advertise as your team all day long, but it doesn't go on the contract. eXp Realty, LLC. The list price has to match the MLS sheet. So we're comparing your MLS sheet for the list price. Firm compensation 7A is the total commission. So if you're charging them 6%, 6% goes in total commission. And then you're going to break it down on the next section. If it's 5%, it's 5%. We can deduct what your commission is going to be based on what you're giving the co-broker. So on the next part, the cooperating compensation, that's where you're going to put in option number 2 with the 3%. The only thing we do not do at eXp is we do not give compensation to co-brokers.
Seller
Or sub-agents, sorry. Yep, wrong word. I was like, wait, that's sub-agents, yes, we do not cooperate with sub-agents. So don't check that box. We're not going to kick it back to you if you do, unless you're offering it on MLS. Because most of the time you're going to go through, you're going to click the boxes, put 3, go down, and then you're going to input it into MLS, and you're like, no, we don't work with sub-agents. And then you're not going to put it on MLS, but you put it on your agreement. So we're not going to kick it back.
Most of us that got a license like years ago. I mean, that's how we were taught to do it. Check, 3, leave the bottom one blank, move
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So if you have had your license for a long time, that's how we were taught to do it. And now it's like, whoa, wait, what? So if you're, again, I want to say, if you're getting kicked back on that, because I know we have been kicking back because, communication, we're trying to make it all mesh on our end. If you're getting kicked back on it, just reply and say, for Shannon or Michelle, this one's fine, and then I'll see it and move it forward. So.
Absolutely. Coming soon. If that checkbox is marked, then we do have to have the form, the coming soon form in the file. If you're in Triangle, that coming soon form does have to be signed. But if you're here in Charlotte, the managing broker doesn't need to sign the form. You can sign it and put it in the file and it's fine. And the managing broker is only going to sign it if CMLS says, let me see it. Then we'll sign it. But we're not going to go signing thousands of coming soon and inundating our mailbox. When we allow coming soon, we'll sign it. It'll be fine. Just make sure you have the form filled out, and that if we needed to add a signature later, we could. Since CMLS is not collecting those things, that would be the only reason why we would need to really sign it. So Matt and I have said we're not going to sign them, but if we need to, we will. Agency selection. So I'm going to go over this one time. The first two boxes are seller 1, seller 2. First column is seller 1, second column is seller 2. The first line is agreeing to work as a dual agent. Dual agent means the EXP has both sides of the transaction, not that you have both sides of the transaction. If they do not check this box, you cannot show another EXP agent's property. I'm going to leave it at that. So, dual agent is probably a good idea. Now, if they want exclusive representation, they don't want anyone else on the other side in our firm to represent them, then they would select number 2, the second option. So, depending on what they answered in question 1 or question 2, if they selected dual agency, then you can select option 3 for designated agency. Designated agency means that the agent 1 and agent 2 at EXP have no working knowledge of each other's clients. And the only person who can really say that is the broker in charge. But because we have such distance between us and we work in a virtual world, the odds of you talking about a file with her may be greater because you guys have something in common, but it's not going to be with you and her. You never worked with her before, right? So you're going to know if you're going to be able to do designated or not at the end of the day. When you're first doing these agreements, you may or may not know, but you can always go back and check designated. What our rule of thumb is that you go ahead and check designated because we want to practice designated if at all possible.
So if I have a listing now where we didn't do that option, do I have to go back to them now, or do I just wait?
Did they select dual agency? Yeah, no, I would just wait.
So let's say we do find another EXP property, or how they come, another EXP agent comes. At that time, do I go in and just have them initial?
Yeah.
Or do I have to do some kind of amendment, or?
No, I would just add the initials if it looks like you could do designated. Now, like, who's team?
No, I'm independent, but Marcus is my sponsor.
Okay, so if Marcus is on the other side of you, you've probably already talked to him about some of this stuff. So you're probably not going to do designated. So let's not check that box. But if it's somebody else that you've never worked with before, never heard of, sure.
Something else on just the listing side. Think about it like this: if you have your seller, and Matt Reyes totally disagrees with this, so if any of you follow your Matt,
all of them do.
Don't tell him.
They aren't under me.
But I'm not even going to mention my thought on that. Never mind. If he completely disagrees with me, I'll go ahead and tell it to you, and then see if it stirs up a controversy. We love doing this. So the top set of initials, if you're representing the seller, and then you also work with buyers, like you'll take buyers for your own listings. If your seller's already initialed or designated agency, in their mind, you're their agent.
Yeah.
So how are you gonna bring a buyer into that situation and represent that buyer
Right.
too? You almost have to refer that buyer out.
Mhm.
So think about that as your business plan. And I think that's how Matt explains it too. He likes to see top and bottom initial, but you have to make sure you have those conversations with your seller. Mr. Seller, if I get a call on this, I won't be able to, I won't be able to work on your behalf. If I'm also working on with the buyer, I have to step into that dual agency role. So,
Same conversation with your buyer.
exactly.
If you mark this, I can't represent you on one of my listings. So if I show it to you, I can show it to you, but I'm gonna have to get someone else to represent you. Because your duty is first gonna be to your seller. So then you'd have to let go of that buyer. So just as a rule of thumb, you may or may not want to. It's just gonna depend on the situation.
And
If you're a buyer's agent and you don't have any listings ever, great. Mark designated all day long.
You wouldn't have a listing agreement if you did.
Or on your buyer
On
agency.
your buyer
Basically,
agency.
Sorry.
basically, you're saying designated check, you have to have two agents involved. You
Yeah.
can't-
Or you have to go back and have another conversation with your seller and make sure that your seller
Understand.
understands that you're gonna, because technically, that's just, the way that I understand it, that's just acknowledgement that if the situation would arise, that they are acknowledging, yes, I would want you to be my designated agent, but it doesn't technically automatically put you in a designated situation until you're truly designated as that agent. Is that what that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it is, this is probably, working with real estate agents and this portion of the buyer's agency and the listing agreement are probably the most
Unclear, confusing.
yes.
Because as much as we work with these contracts, I had to reread that. There's
Well, they change.
several, they change it or they tweak a word here or there. And I had a situation with one of my brokers a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, does that really say that? So I called Matt and I'm like, hey, is this? And he was like, I don't know, let's read it again.
Yeah.
So, then you go through and you pick and you pick and you pick and you can get so far down a rabbit hole. So we just want to give you a general overview of the things to do and things to look out for.
In reality, really, at the end of the day, though, your interpretation doesn't matter. It's what the lawyers say, correct? It's the lawyers.
We're trying to operate as far within the law as we can and to cover us to the best of our abilities. So that's kind of what some of these best practices are for. Yeah. All right. So same thing I added the buyer agency agreement. Most of this stuff is the same, but I just want to touch over it. Again, the firm is eXp Realty LLC. Unless you have a firm name, you can add both, but you have to have your own firm name and it has to have eXp Realty on it. Compensation of firm. When you fill out this form, you sometimes will and sometimes will not know what property you're writing a contract for. So if you are just getting a buyer client and you have no idea what the MLS is going to offer, you need to put the expected compensation. Again, expected compensation. So if in your market it's 2.4%, put 2.4%. If it's 3%, put 3%. Now, if you want to do 2.5 for construction and 2.4% for commission and 3% for sale by owner, and you want to list it out like that, that's fine. What it cannot be is it cannot be per MLS. It can't be 2 to 3%. It can't be a range. It has to be very specific, and it has to be what you're expecting to get paid. This already, the whole agreement already covers if you don't get paid as much. You don't have to go back to the buyer and make them re-sign a new one. As long as you're getting paid that amount or less, you've disclosed it. Now, if you get paid more, that's when you need to go back and redisclose to your buyer, hey, I'm getting paid 3.5% because this new construction is offering a bonus. So I'm actually getting paid 3.5%, not 3. Then you have to do another confirmation of compensation. or at least at minimum have it in writing that you told your client that you're getting paid more.
Can I ask your advice on that? I have a client that absolutely would not sign it with a number in there because they would have to come up with a difference. And I've showed her 50 homes around Charlotte, Fort Mill, Valentine.
Oh,
Yes,
my
yes,
God.
true story. She wouldn't even sign it until she had seen property. So I finally got her to sign it, but she would not sign it with a number in there. How would you have navigated that?
Some people are just more difficult than others.
Say there are other parts of that contract that state.
You can.
variance. I mean, does it say somewhere that,
Mhm.
I mean, you alluded.
It does,
to
right
that.
underneath
What I
it.
do to alleviate that, so I
A lot.
I sometimes do that too. When I do my original buyer agency, like my buyer folder, I have sample MLS sheets in there where I've highlighted and circled the commission being paid. And I tell my clients, every time we go look at a house, I'll have this with me and I will show you specifically what I'm being paid. If it's more than what you've agreed to on my buyer agency, we'll have a conversation with that and we'll make changes if need be. But I clearly communicate with you up front what the fee I'm going to receive is. This is just a safehold for the commission, the North Carolina Real Estate Commission, between you, me, and my broker at my firm. You know, and that kind of has helped through that process because I get what you're saying. And I think someone online yesterday said that they showed 300 and some houses one time. It was one of our managing brokers too. I'm like, you would admit that? But you know, it happens to all of us. And like Shannon said, there's going to be extenuating circumstances to that. But if you talk about clearly communicating to them about it from the very beginning, it usually alleviates that. And then you always show them what you're receiving, circle it, highlight it, whatever.
And you'll get a feel for people. Yeah, it's just different. So, you know, you're going to get a feel for people. You're going to get a feel for if that person was jerking your chain, you're going to know. If you're so new that maybe you don't know and they are jerking your chain and they're not going to purchase anything, it will be a lesson learned. So you have to make that decision. Are they just one of those people? And they're going to sign at the end of the day, once you get them under contract and it's all going to be okay. They're just like, I'm not signing anything until we go under contract. That's okay. You just have to take that risk.
So don't put to be determined or.
Nope.
If you do that, know that it's going to get sent back to you with an FYI. It needs to be specific percentage. And then by contract, you would need a specific percentage in there.
So when I actually get ready for an offer, I can go back, I can put that in there and submit it.
Yeah.
Make sure it's initial.
Yeah.
All
right.
Yeah.
It's just one of those situations. These 3 boxes of the sample copies. These 3 boxes of the sample copies that need to be given. We see a lot of times people are not checking these boxes. Y'all should be. You should be giving this stuff to your clients. Yes.
I have a question with that. I was speaking to one of my mentors, and I guess they said that's better to just email rather than just send them through here. Is that?
Yeah, you can. As long as you're providing it to them.
Or was it better like to just provide it to them and pay for it?
Either way. Either way. It's however you're working. So if you're giving them a packet, then maybe have it printed off in there and say, here's the packet. If you're communicating with them over email, you can absolutely email it to them. But you should be giving this to them because part of the offer to purchase is, did they receive this stuff? Mm-hmm. So you should be checking all of these boxes and making sure that they get them. Yeah, good question. So we're going to skip over agency selection. You heard what I said first. So dual agency compensation right under that on this form should be filled out. Our firm policy is 6%. It is in the North Carolina policies and procedures, and it should be there because you never know when you're going to get into a situation where you have dual agency. You might think you're never going to take a listing, and you'll get a listing, and it'll be dual agency. But this should always be filled out.
Well, can you take a listing for less than 6%?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just we as our company have said, okay, this is what we charge. So it's 6% dual agency, 3% For I can't talk today. Fireside. I haven't been able to do this for all week. All right. So we have that in our policies and procedures to give you a kind of a guideline.
I can say we have a firm policy of 6%, that's not against anything, trust, whatever.
No, we can say we have a firm policy. That's our firm policy. What you can't say is everyone in this area charges
Right.
6%. So that you pay it. No, our firm policy is 6%. Yes, you can say that. Our firm policy is 6%. Yeah, just make sure you're using the right words. And then make sure on all of your agency forms that the firm information is completed with eXp Realty, your signature, the date, the firm license number, and the address of your that's affiliated on your license. So if I'm your broker in charge, your address is the Langtree address. If Matt Reyes is the broker in charge, the address is the Perimeter Parkway address.
Wait, say that one more time.
If I'm your broker in charge, the address is the Langtree Village, 106 Langtree Village Drive, Suite 301, Mooresville 28117.
Sweet. How's it divided now?
We're still moving people around, but depending on how you filled out your regionalization form, if you want to be affiliated with the Mooresville address, you're under me. If you want to be affiliated with the Charlotte address, you're under Matt.
What was the suite? 305?
301.
301. And it's 28117.
28117.
But not all of that is sorted out yet, right?
It hasn't.
We'll
yeah.
get a form saying who we're under.
Well, it's out on
Who the
Workplace.
changes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's already live and active. You can find the Google form. If you can't find it, just send me an email and I'll shoot it out to you.
Okay.
Yeah, we want to make sure, and anybody in this room who hasn't filled it out, let's push it out. Let's get it filled out. And if you know anybody who hasn't filled it out, ask them to fill it.
Oh, I filled it out. I
Okay.
just haven't heard anything.
Yes, no, we haven't moved anybody yet. Yeah, we're still trying to get, we got Michelle affiliated with Triad. We're still trying to work that out and make sure everyone's there. And with Stephen Norris leaving and Mark Iafredi coming in, putting him into Triangle, we're trying to make sure that area is all good to go before we dive into the 1,000 agents we have here in Charlotte. So that's one of the things we have going on here.
Matt's gonna have a party when that happens.
Actually, he wants to keep some of his agents, but logistically they have to come over to me. But that's because he wants me to help him more.
So are you like just in the Lake Norman area, or are you helping like all the EXP?
Yeah, so my job is very
Yeah.
strange.
She does everything.
My job is very strange. But yes, I help everyone in EXP, but I am a broker in charge for Lake Norman. But if you're one of Matt's people, Tiffany knows, you can call me and I will answer your questions. If my people can call Matt, if they run into Matt, hey Matt, and they'll be like, yeah. So Matt and I are just kind of the same person.
Is there a preference for the?
Yeah, Matt's in charge of Charlotte.
I mean, you want to
Y'all
affiliate,
trying to
because of the
find-
address through KB Corey, you want to affiliate with what address you want to market. That's the way
Yeah.
we do it, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you're here in Lake Norman, you're probably not going to want to affiliate with me in Triad. It's, you may want Triad access, and there's a way to do that, but you're probably not going to want to use my Elm Street, Greensboro address.
Charlotte, Lake Norman.
Oh,
Is there-
I don't-
is there-
Is there what?
Is there a difference between Charlotte and Lake Norman?
Is there
Address.
something y'all are trying to establish?
It's just the address. It's just the address. If you're selling more in Lake Norman, you may want to say, hey, my address is Mooresville. If you're kind of here in Cornelius, Davidson, so if you're in Huntersville, that gets a little tricky, right? You're still the lake, but it depends on where you're selling. So if you're selling more in Charlotte, maybe you want the Charlotte address. But if you're selling more in Cornelius, Davidson, Mooresville, then maybe you want to use the Mooresville address. So it's really a preference. We can dual affiliate under 2 agents, but you're not going to want to do that in the Charlotte market because you'll pay MLS dues twice. Right. So once is good. Just pick which one is going to be best for you and go on. Yeah. All right. We have a couple more forms to go over briefly. Your offer to purchase. We want to make sure that the seller names match the tax records or the deed. We make sure that the address matches and it matches in Skyslope. Your due diligence and earnest money amounts match on page 13 for what, or 14 for what you're getting signed. There's a caveat to the due diligence page 14. If you never touched funds, we don't need the page signed. Is it good to have? Yes. If you absolutely cannot get it and from the other people or whatever it is, but you never touch funds, it's fine. Just notate it.
Should we go back to the names for a second?
Sure.
So I've got a contract where the husband is only on the deed, but he's married and she's on the property disclosure. So I added her to the contract. How do I verify that that's spelled correctly and middle initials and what the hell?
The attorney will do that.
So
It's
don't worry
fine.
about it. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be like.
No. I mean, if there's a misspelling, the attorney will figure it out. We just want to make sure that if they aren't on tax records or on the deed, we understand that, you know, a wife may or may not be on the deed or a husband or whatnot. But if they're married, you can put them both on the contract. It's fine.
And I'll shake out.
Yep. The attorney will do that. We just want to make sure it doesn't say Fred Smith and your client is Becky Davis and they don't know each other. And, you know, we just want to make sure we've got the right people in there to the best of our ability. All right. Escrow agent must be filled out. If there is earnest money, the escrow agent must be filled out. That cannot be to be determined or I'll figure it out later. No, you need to know where that escrow check is going to go, where that EMD is going to go. So that one has to be filled out, can't be to be determined. If you absolutely have to put to be determined, you can use the agreement 4T, agreement to amend, and add the escrow agent there. Even if you put you think it's going to be one, you can change it later by using the amendment. I just would not ever put to be determined. I would put an escrow agent. And then any of these forms, any of the addendum that you use need to be checked here. And then if they are checked here, we're going to require them in your checklist. This is how we're looking for your addendums. We're not guessing or going to do detective work. So if you check it here, we're going to ask for it. If it's not checked here, we're not going to ask for it. And then your notice page. This piece here was at page 12, now page 13. You need to make sure you have both sides filled out. You need to make sure you have as much information as you can, but you do not have to put the firm address because you don't want to get termination paperwork mailed to you. It's a caveat. You can put it there. It's fine. You just don't have to. If you're going to put your firm address there, make sure it's the one affiliated with your license. The acting as checkboxes right here, acting as seller's agent or dual agent, acting as buyer's agent, seller sub-agent, or dual agent. Those boxes need to be filled out correctly. That is also disclosing agency to both sides of the transaction. So we want to make sure that that's right. It should never be seller sub-agent. So if you have for sale by owner and there's no notice information for the listing firm, but you represent the buyer and it's for sale by owner, just put on the listing firm for sale by owner. And then you can leave the rest of it blank. It's fine. But if it's firm information, you need to make sure that the firm information you have is there and it's correct. Our firm license number is C22682. And that's what should be on your contract. Make sure your name is on there, your license number, and a phone number and an email.
If we don't have the other side's info, like.
Get it off of MLS.
No, I'm not the agent. I meant the seller, the owner.
Mhm.
Like you said, fill it out completely. Like if I don't have their email.
No, if it's for sale by owner, just put for sale by owner and leave the rest blank.
But what if it's not for sale by owner? How do I get their phone number? and
You
email?
don't, she's not talking about the top part.
Not the top part.
Oh,
Just
bottom
the
part.
agency.
Okay.
Yeah, I covered that.
Got it.
Yeah, the top part where it says buyer and seller information, I would never
Oh, you don't even.
Never put any information.
Oh,
You don't.
You don't
because
wanna-
you putting their information there is allowing anybody that is a party of that transaction to contact your client. It's authorization to contact your client.
Nope.
Never. And if you want to go as far as putting a contact listing agent or contact buyer's agent up top there, you could do that as well, so that they know that you want all or contact and information to go through you.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. All right. This is the 4T agreement to amend. You can use this to change the sales price, change and add additional earnest money, or change due diligence money, change the escrow agent, change the closing date, and change seller pay closing costs. You check the box, and then each party initials at the bottom and signs the next page. Pretty self-explanatory, but I just want to point out what is on this form so you know it's there.
Please don't use that form and type something in. Like
Oh, yeah.
In a text box and have all parties initial to make a faux agreement to amend. If you have to agreement to amend and there's not a pre-made form for it, have the attorney that's closing it draft it for you, or have your seller's attorney draft it for you. Please don't do that. That's like one of my pet peeves.
Yeah.
So the attorney has to draft this every time?
No.
The form as it sits can be done by an agent. That's why it was created.
Okay.
But don't add like,
Gotcha. I get it.
Add wording,
Yeah,
or-
and
yeah.
don't even add, don't add excessive wording to it.
Don't draft. Okay. All right, so this is what our quick audit looks like. The first time I taught this, I actually pulled it up and reviewed a file, and they about fell over. We're not being all that picky. I know it can feel like we are, but we are flying through these files. So this is what it looks like for us. We'll go through each document. We click on each document, and it'll bring up that document. We scroll through it, move on, make our notes, and go on. Up here in the top right-hand corner is where that says needs initial review. That's where we'll broker approve it. We can say it needs missing documents or broker approval. We can put in comments and things like that. So this is our broker audit review. After we review it, you'll get an email from us saying it's either approved or there's something needed to be done. So the one on the left is an example of if you needed to make corrections, this is what you will see in your email. So the notes will kind of be floating there in the middle. The one on the right, if it's approved, you'll see approved with our initials, and that's what you'll end up seeing.
That top box, agent completion of file, until it's closed and archived by payment processing, it'll stay in that orange status. I can't see what it says.
In
It's
review.
In review
Yeah.
status, so don't send it back or email us
Say you
about that.
forgot to complete
Yeah.
this one.
It stays like that.
And we're going to talk about that coming up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Let's touch on agent-owned properties for a moment. Before we get we're almost done here. So, the buyer must sign an agent-owner disclosure. The agent-owner interest disclosure, ownership interest, as well as an agency representation disclosure. So,
And the buyer inspection waiver.
yeah, the buyer inspection waiver. When you have a listing and it's your home, you have to fill out that agent ownership interest form, and you have to provide it to the buyer. The buyer also has to sign it, saying, I know I'm buying a house from a real estate agent. There have been some changes to this, and some are kind of standing rules and some aren't. So we're going to go over that. The ownership disclosure has to be done. The buyer inspection waiver has to be filled out if the buyer does not do a home inspection. Yes.
Can you just clarify, as you go through this, sales versus rental? Is, I mean,
Mm,
is this all applying to?
this is all applying to sales. The sale of a listing,
Okay,
the
that's fine.
sale of a personal home. Yeah. Rental transactions, I'll just go ahead and do that now. You can rent your own houses out. It's fine. We don't really want to have anything to do with the property management side. So we don't really have anything to say about that. But if it's your own personal home and you're renting out properties, it's kind of your own home. Just, you know, do
You're
it
not gonna sue
correctly.
yourself, so there's not much liability
Right.
for us.
You know,
But it's on MLS.
you don't have to open up a property management firm to do property management for your
the
own personal
only-
home you're renting
So
out.
that, yes, you would put that into Skyslope and we would process that because you're probably not gonna rent it yourself and another
Another
agent is
agent.
gonna rent it and that would be processed through EXP and they would be sending that or processing that, so. Yes, right? That's what April said the other day. Depends on how the
That
attorney
was-
has, well, there wouldn't be an attorney with a rental, so yeah.
Well, if the other party is not an EXP agent, it would be run through their own firm and they would be paying them.
Let's just move forward and I can.
Possibly.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
So the agent ownership interest disclosure has to be signed, and then if the buyer does not do a home inspection, they have to sign a waiver, or at least something in writing saying, no, I'm not signing your stupid form, and I don't want a home inspection. You know, even if it's an email saying that, then at least we're kind of CYAing.
What is that form? Is that EXP or is that NC form?
It's an EXP form. It's in Skyslope working documents, office documents. And then a couple of these. So an agent may buy and sell a total of 3 personal transactions in a 12-month period. The fee per personal sale is $315. $250 transactions fee, $40 E&O, and $25 broker review fee if you have not capped. If you have capped, it's $250.
Oh, that 315 is all inclusive.
Mhm.
I thought that replaced the 250. It went up from 250 to 250.
No.
Oh,
315 is the personal transaction fee, including E&O and broker review. Yep. Additional transactions are subject to no less than the minimum commission and fees payable to EXP as reflected in the policies and procedures manual. This being said, if you use your 3 and you want to sell 4 more of your own properties, you have to at least do minimum commission. Please know that you're not going to cap doing that, but $565 is minimum commission. $500 minimum commission, $40 E&O, $25 broker review fee. All forms must be state approved with full and accurate signatures and dates. Again, using the documents that we have, the offer to purchase and contract, and if you're not using those, they have to be attorney drafted forms. Completed seller's disclosure must have all signatures, dates, and initials. Your RPD has to be filled out. Under no circumstances can the agent represent the buyer and cannot act as an intermediary in the sale of their own property. This is not an EXP thing, this is a commission thing. You absolutely cannot represent a buyer on the other side of a transaction you have any personal interest in. So for example, I'm selling my home that I lived in, but it's owned in my family's trust. I'm not listed on the trust until like the 15th person, right? So my parent, my grandpa, my parent, and then us kids, you know, down the line. So on the initial document, I'm not on there. So I can't sell it as my personal home. So I have to sell it as minimum commission. So even though I'm selling it as minimum commission, am I going to touch a buyer with a 10-foot pole? Absolutely not. Because I have connections, I have ties there. I'm not going to do that. So just using your judgment and your interest. If it's not at an arm's length, don't do it.
How do you handle an open house?
I won't do it.
Yeah, I would let another agent do it
Mhm.
because you're gonna have interaction with potential buyers and that's.
Yeah.
I think it really represents your own house.
Nope.
You don't want
Not
to hear
doing
all the bad things they say about it
Yeah.
either.
I was just wondering, get it on the cameras. Okay. Yeah,
So-
just put a post on Workplace and say, hey, I'm selling my own property. Does anybody want to hold an open house for me this weekend? I have a personal property for sale. Does anybody want to hold an you will get answered.
Yeah.
So if you sell your kid or your parents' house, you fall into the 565.
Yep.
It has to be in your name.
Or your spouse. You or your spouse.
And
If it's
just
a
like
family.
too, like if you buy a house, to my daughter wants to buy a house, I would have to buy it with her. If.
Nope.
I can't buy a house with her.
You can.
Okay.
If you buy it with her, it's a 315. You buy it, if she buys it.
$315.
565.
Yep.
Okay.
We just put in the minimum commission on the
Yes.
buyer
Buyer
agency.
side.
It's still 500, right?
Yes.
In the 565. Okay. Yeah. So that is for the buyer and seller. Yes.
So it's either 315 or 565.
As long as
If it's
three
a
or
personal
zero.
transaction for your first 3, you can do 315 if you want to use it as a personal sale, so long as it's being sold or bought by you or your spouse. If you go over that, say your 4th transaction, say you're an investor, and you could sell it as minimum commission or buy it as minimum commission with
But
a
if I'm-
565.
But if I'm helping my daughter get a house, how does that work?
You have to pay the minimum
I have-
commission.
Minimum commission, but I don't have to be on the deed?
No.
Oh,
EXP has just put a policy in place that you have to charge a minimum. EXP has to collect a minimum, which is
You can
565.
represent your child, but if you were selling your child's house, you're not going to want to represent the other side because you have too much information. Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah. The property must have a home inspection done by the licensed inspector. If licensing is a requirement in the state in which the property is located, this comes straight out of the PMB, US PMB. And a copy of the inspection along with the addendum and or amendments must be a part of the file. If the buyer waives the right to an inspection, the buyer must state that waiver in writing and sign the buyer inspection waiver if all possible. There are plenty of people who say, I'm not signing your stupid waiver. It happens all the time. But they say that in an email and then you just upload the email.
And a lot of times it's pushback from the buyer's agent or the
Mhm.
buyer's agent's firm saying, we're not signing that.
How many of you have worked with or for Keller Williams and they make you sign those disclosures and you go, why do I need to sign that? It has nothing to do with me. Okay, I'll get it signed, but same.
Where does that go? Miscellaneous or?
There is if you have the listing documents, in the listing checklist, there is a place for it. It's not required, but it's there. And the listing
Buyer
documents.
waivers in the listing.
Yep.
Okay.
The agent disclosure, agent interest disclosure.
I got that
They're just
fine. I just didn't know.
unrequired, and it's hard to say, okay, this is my own property, and for you guys to check the right checklist, and then we'll have 15 other checklists, so we just don't do that. But the slots are there in the listing side, but they're just not required to do. It is suggested, it was required, EXP required it, and they got a ton of pushback, but it's suggested that you provide a home warranty for your own properties if you're selling your own property. Ownership must be disclosed in all marketing materials, MLS, advertising, and stated in special provisions on the contract, regardless of what % interest is owned by the agent. So you have to disclose it, if at all possible, wherever possible. Agent is required to turn in a copy of the full closing disclosure and copies of any commission checks, and that's with any file. The only difference for agent-owned properties, and this is that checklist. The only caveat to the documents for agent-owned properties is that you do have to have a listing agreement or a buyer agency agreement because that agreement is between yourself and the firm. But you do not have to do a working with real estate agents for yourself, and you do not have to do a professional services disclosure with yourself. You're not going to sue yourself. So those are the two things you don't have to do. But Tiffany, see under listing documentation here, we can require them if we know as we're reviewing, we can go back and add it. And if it's not required, if they're showing not required, that's what it will look like. Okay. So these different types of transactions, BPOs, outside referrals, rentals, BPOs can be entered, are entered as a transaction. So create transaction. You can create one transaction per check with multiple addresses. So if you did 10 BPOs with 10 different addresses, but they paid you $100 on one check, because let's be honest, they probably not going to be much. But it's $100, $200 check, right? So it's just one tiny check. You can create that by putting BPO as the street number, the check number as the address, filling in as much information as you may have. You can fill in fictitious information. With all of these options here, if you don't have it, make it up and put it in there. It's okay. We know it's just on our side. It's got to be set up for you to get paid that way. It's how Skyslope and Enterprise work together to get you paid. So you can make up some of that information. Just list all of the addresses on that commission section in Skyslope. That notes box, list all the addresses there that you're getting paid for. Outside referrals, again, enter as a transaction. You can use some of these guidelines, enter as much information as you have, upload a copy of the signed referral agreement and a copy of the check to get paid. So those are referrals you've given out that you're getting paid for. Rentals. In Skyslope, under working documents and office docs, there is a form called a lease invoice. It has one side for your information, one side for the property management, and how much rental commission you're getting. That's the only form we need with a copy of the check for you to get paid. If you have any questions about these kind of one-off files, just let us know. And also in the transaction quick reference guide is an even better tutorial for these. This is a kind of a quick glance of what working documents looks like. You go into working documents and then click on office documents. And this is where all of our information is housed for EXP specific forms. We now have folders for our regions that we're going to try to start using. It's just hard for us to access them. They don't give us that level of access for, say, Michelle and I to upload our Charlotte or Lake Norman or Triad specific forms into. But in the North Carolina folder, just the plain North Carolina folder, is the referral agreement that does not require BIC signatures. It's that real simple EXP referral agreement, and it does not require a BIC signature. So same thing, the commission doesn't dictate this, and so we don't need to sign those forms. It's between you and the other agent. There's my surprise. This is her baby. My beautiful little nephew. So the agent completion of file form. See, wasn't that so much better than seeing this agent completion of file form? I just wanted to visually put something in there. It can be anything. It can be the agent completion of file form. It can be some other random form. It can be a picture of your kids, your grandkids, your beautiful nephews, your dogs, your lakes, your beautiful homes, whatever it is. Entertain us, because this job can get very boring when you're sitting there reviewing contracts all day. So it's a trigger. It's a review trigger, but it also helps us help payment processing get you paid. That's why, as Michelle said, we're not going to accept that document. It's never going to show completed. It's always going to say in review until the file is settled out, because that's the document that gets your file moved to the next step. And it allows us that quick audit I showed you. Your file doesn't show up in quick audit unless we have a open piece of paper or something in there that's not accepted, an unaccepted document. I guess there's no good word for that. A file in review, for us to see it, it won't show up. So when we approve it and kick it to payment processing, it won't show up in their queue unless this document is not approved. So that's why we don't do that. But it is a review trigger that we use internally.
I was typing an email. I apologize. Yeah. So we're processing our files in real time right now, and we have kind of paused it if we see that you're currently uploading documents, because last week people were literally uploading files and we were reviewing it while they were uploading files. Oh my gosh. And I can understand, as an agent, I can understand the frustration in that. Oh my gosh, why are they kicking it back? I'm not even done with it yet. But no, that was a huge accomplishment for us to get to real time, because for months, we were 2 to 3 weeks out. I mean, we had hundreds of files in review, and we really needed to get to that point. So again, be gracious with us. If we've reviewed a file and you didn't have it complete yet, you didn't have this form in, it's fine. It's just a sweet little FYI. Hey, this is what we're still needing. And just know that we're coming from contribution and complete love when we're sending those messages most of the time. Just work with us and we'll work with you, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And we have kind of backed down with the listings and the needs initial review. When we get to that 10 to 20 files left, we're kind of looking at the logs and making sure that it looks like you guys haven't worked on the file in a couple hours. Because I was getting blown up with emails, phone calls, text messages. Like, what is going on? Like, what are they even doing yet? I'm like, calm down. It's love. It's love.
It is. It's love. Love and education. That's what I preach. I still need to make that graphic. It's pretty cool. So transaction management updates. The CCS PPS focuses on getting you paid and educating you to become the best agent that you can be. So again, coming from that place of love and education, look for education notes. It'll look like this: education, colon, with the note. In your updates, these are items that need to be addressed moving forward, but they're not going to affect the approval of your file. Corrections needed are the items that are needed before we can broker approve your file. Updates are coming down the pipeline to help you get paid and be the most agent-centric real estate firm on the planet. Cannot announce what they are yet, but there are things that are going to be changing and everyone's going to take a deep breath. But hopefully, I'm saying that now, but it's got to come down the pipeline before we can announce it. So everybody kind of keep one ear out about those things. But it should help all of us at the end of the day. Use the North Carolina transactions email, so nc.transactions@exprealty.com to reach any payment processing and contract compliance specialist. This is the preferred method of contact instead of reaching out to the individual CCS and PPS's emails and work chats. They're monitoring this email box all day long live, so you should have a response from them within a few hours, with the exception of if you send it at 4 o'clock, please be gracious that it may not get returned until the next day. But that is an absolute 24-hour or less response time. And it also eliminates the confusion of who goes where and does what and who answers who, and we move people around and so forth. So yeah. Please do not use work chat and the individual emails. It is bogging the girls down. And so we've had to come up with a system, and this was the system that we came up with. This email comes into a transaction place that looks kind of like a CRM. So how you guys would manage your leads, that's how they're managing these emails, and they get them consistently. If you need, absolutely have to have something right this minute, then maybe just reach out to Michelle. But try to use this transactions email. I said this in state meeting when I was table dancing with my avatar the other day. I had a wild streak in me the other day. But a lack of preparation on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine. That's what I teach my kids, and that's what I'm going to teach my agents. We are in such a good place in review that there should never be an emergency. If it was not handled a week before closing and you're just now telling me, well, why isn't this done correctly? That's not my fault. As much as we love you and we will help you and we will get it done, please kind of keep that saying in mind. We are going to help you, but we really all want to work together to try to be prepared and having our files ready to go. So when it hits that 5 days before closing, your file should be broker approved by then, and payment processing should get your DA out. And then if you see any issues with your DA, once it's there, you can email the nc.transactions. They'll get it fixed and you'll be ready for closing. If at any time you have any concerns about how you're going to close, You can close. You always can close, but it's going to be one check to EXP. And that's all you need to say is here's the PO Box 603506 to Charlotte. Mail one check to EXP. They just didn't get me my DA, or I messed up and I didn't get a DA. Here, mail this one check to EXP.
We do process to closing date. Another reason to make sure that the closing date is is in there
Yeah.
correctly. And if you email one of us separately, all we're gonna do is reply to you. Thank you so much. In the future, please utilize, we're gonna give you that email address again, and then we're gonna CC that email address, and then in Zoho, I'm basically going in and just assigning it to transaction management or taking care of it if it's a CCS thing. So if you're not utilizing that email, it's getting forwarded to it. And know that's taking a minute or two out of my day to not be able to process one of your files, or somebody's files. So.
Yeah. So we're just trying to push this and teach it and get it out there that this is the best way to reach someone. We have a pretty good team put together right now that is really doing the things that need to be done. So on that side of it, on the transaction side of it, things should not be falling through the cracks. Ultimately, sometimes they're going to with the amount of things that, come to our attention on a daily basis. One email may or may not get taken care of. But on those one-off situations, then you could just shoot Michelle a work chat, probably would be easier, and just say, hey, I sent an email to NC Transactions, didn't hear anything. And then she can go look up your name and check and make sure we got it. Also, transactions and EXP Realty can be tricky to spell when you're looking at it all in one. So make sure you have it spelled correctly, because if you didn't hear anything, you might have spelled it wrong, or if it got kicked back. And if you email us, you're also going to get an out of office saying, hey, I don't check this email. Email nc.co. Do ask questions. This is what this is for. Our training, Michelle's going to teach this next week. We had to push this because I was sick last week. So she's going to be teaching this next week in the world. And we're also going to have a special guest, Krista. Is that how you say her last name? I have to ask her. But she's the payment processing team lead, Krista Pete. She's our payment processing team lead, and she is going to be in the world with Michelle answering any payment processing questions. So she's going to start doing that once a month as well.
Kind of a comment.
Yeah.
When you all say you send out updates and stuff, as a new person, I'm finding it extremely difficult to constantly go to all these different places in work chat to find information. Or I feel like that's where I'm having
In workplace?
Workplace.
Yeah.
To me, if it's a matter of, I don't want to say this and not get
Just say
sound
it.
offensive,
We're not
but
gonna
it's
be
like
offended.
Facebook.
It is.
Okay.
Powered by Facebook.
Yeah, it is.
And to me, Facebook is not all that important. If it's very important, I prefer to have an email sent to me directly saying there is an update.
So let me
Check
tell you what
this
happens
area.
with that. We send out emails, and then everybody gets pissed off that we send out too many emails. We've tried this balance and finding back and forth. I mean, it's being quite honest. You work for a tech company. This is what's going to happen. All of these things are going to be sent out by tech. Coming to the state meetings will help you get a lot of that information, and you don't have to be so up to date on Workplace. But Workplace is where we're all networking. It's where we're all communicating. It's if I come up with an issue or Michelle comes up with an issue, we're gonna be like, hey guys, this is what we're seeing right now. I'm gonna push this back out, or hey, I'm gonna throw together a training real quick. This is what we're gonna do. Just like in state meeting, I saw the need for another regionalization meeting. So we're having another regionalization meeting tomorrow after state meeting. And I'm just going ahead and throwing these things together so we can get the trainings put in. If I'm seeing things and it's going to be best practices, whatever the best practices class is going to be, we'll try to push that out. But the best place that we can push it out and we get the best response is from Workplace, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I
If you come to
understand
the
that.
state meeting on Thursdays, you come to our state meeting on Thursdays, because
Yeah.
most of that information is being pushed out then. Also, like, we're including the majority of the updates and the important information in that as well.
Yeah, I'm just saying though that it's so much information to take in that I need to go back a lot to
Yeah.
reread these.
Yeah, I do too. I find myself in the evening.
And I try to save as much as I can when I'm there. But
Yeah,
what I'm just saying
so-
is, I just, even though, say it's in workplace.
Yeah.
But instead of having state meetings, so many different categories, I feel like I have to go to so many different categories to find the information, instead of saying updates. Every update is put into this workplace section so that I know I can just go to one place on workplace, doesn't matter, that is updates.
Right.
And it just has everything. And then from there, it can direct me to state area, this area, instead of sifting through. It's like finding a needle in a haystack.
I
is what I'm
guess
saying.
then look at your email, because anytime that there's something put in the NC State,
Uh-huh.
you'll receive an email and the first 5 or 6 words of that are pertaining to whatever the message is. So if it's something that you think pertains to you, click on it, read it. If not, delete it.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you
Well,
don't
I
know,
do do that.
I don't get those.
I have mine turned off, that's annoying for me.
Yeah, they may have their settings,
No.
change differently, but basically
Yeah, I
the
don't
short
know.
answer is you work for a tech company and this is how we communicate. If you have questions, I would maybe look at using that hashtag list and trying to search North Carolina State Group by keywords or hashtags. And hopefully that'll help condense it down quite a bit. I am working on possibly putting together a website that may have that section that you're talking about, updates. This is the updates for this week. Something like that. Yes.
There was a glare on the screen. Is
Yes.
it NC dot transaction?
Yes.
Okay.
NC dot transactions.
I mean, transaction.
Any CCS or PPS.
Right, okay.
Yeah, compliance or payment processing. You can get both of those.
Any more questions?
Mhm. If you are also needing immediate help, other than Thursdays, come to the broker floor. CCSs and PPSs sit in their office. They're not available to take questions, especially payment processing. But a broker on the floor can go get them and say, hey, this person needs help now. So I have that in another slide as well. I might want to move that in doing that. But yes.
One question. I wonder if it would help in workplace, how NC State Group, and then up at the top, it has, the posts, and then it has file, and then it has other, like you could do video, you could get all that. I wonder if it would help to add a tab to that has updates,
We
or
can't.
you can.
That's
Okay.
a workplace
That's a deal. Okay.
package. We can't. That would be great. But we
What
can't.
time are state meetings?
Thursdays at 10 a.m.
In the
Come
red
see
hall.
my podium.
It's a red hall.
I tried to do it in the boardroom yesterday. They were laughing at me. It didn't work. So your resources are your transaction quick reference guide, Skyslope cheat sheet, agent completion of file, your ICA, your PMP, and your North Carolina PMP. These files can be found if you go to North Carolina State Group. Over here, we have NC typically in front of all of our groups. So North Carolina State Group. And then under the North Carolina State Group header is it about, posts, files, and more. If you click on files, that's where all of the files are. Your transaction quick reference guide, the Skyslope cheat sheet, the North Carolina PMP, and I didn't add the FAQ. Yeah, frequently asked questions. Payment processing and contract compliance are also working on a FAQ for PPS CCS. So if you do have questions you would like to maybe see in one of these guides, that you're always answering questions for other people, send it to the nc.transactions email address and say, I have a suggestion for an FAQ question, and send it there. So we're always taking your suggestions. All right, I'm gonna skip over this, late paperwork submissions. Michelle, I left it in here because we may be going back to that. But Michelle, do you have anything thing to say on late paperwork submissions? Are we finding anyone, or is that really at the discretion of the managing broker?
We're not finding anyone right now, but there is a list being, like
Naughty list?
compiled.
Naughty list,
A naughty list,
yeah.
We have a naughty list going for a couple different things. And honestly, it's more seasoned agents, truthfully, it's agents that are a little bit more seasoned that should know better and should be doing it. Just have to go and have conversations. We don't have
If you are late, what happens if
right now.
Typically, you get a talking to from your broker in charge. First, you're going to meet with CCS. If you've met with CCS and you're still not doing it, you're going to meet with your managing broker. After you've met with your managing broker and you're not listening to your managing broker is going to start setting fines. That's kind of what's going to happen. We were allowed to do it, then we weren't. And so I thought we were going to maybe go back. So I'm going to skip over that. It's worth mentioning, but we're not going to keep it as a talking point, or we're not going to dive into it. Your transaction management staff, your CCSs are Michelle Rochelle, Lori Barnwell, and Andrea Marshall. Payment processing is April Keegans, Carly Fink-Maddox, and Heidi O'Neill. We've swapped Heidi and Andrea recently, so they're training, cross-training on both sides. So this is where they're going to be for quite a while. I am just going to go ahead and announce this kind of, but I'm kind of stepping back out of this day-to-day role. Michelle is stepping into that day-to-day role and is kind of overseeing everything contract compliance at this point. As Michelle said, I do, it's hard to explain what I do on a daily basis, but I'm taking on more of that managing broker role, and I'm helping run the state internally. So I am helping with this to a certain extent, but I'm not, my hands aren't in it day to day anymore. So, but if we use the nc.transactions email address, you guys will reach one of them.
I mean, you don't want 2 jobs?
I have like 5,
Yeah.
but 5 or 6.
Okay, so you're eliminating.
Yeah, so basically we don't have a DMB in North Carolina anymore. We don't have that designated managing broker as one person. So what we've done is we're a state of managing brokers. We have a lot of us, and we should all be able to pitch in accordingly. And there's a couple of us who are overseeing the managing brokers and making sure all the pieces of the puzzle get worked out. And that's what I'm doing. So if you guys have any suggestions or any of that thing, so when you see my avatar, people go, what's a broker team lead? Managing broker team lead. Well, it's kind of the DMB role, but it's not a DMB role. So I know I've had a lot of questions about that. So I just thought I'd go ahead and address that while we're here. But it's kind of just an internal thing at this point. We are all managing brokers and we all help run the state. We all help each other. So Charlene does a great job with the provisional brokers and working with the mentor program. So if you've talked to her on that side of it, you can absolutely ask her questions. You can go to her for expertise. You can go to Mark. He's Iafredi. He's helping with the provisional brokers as well. You can go to them and ask questions. Just because they're not in your region doesn't mean they're not a great resource for you. Utilize the broker office hours on the floor. The only day we're not really available is Thursday. We're going to be on the broker floor a little more often, not just one of us going forward. We're trying to put more staff on the broker floor so you can come in and ask your questions and
Not
have
the world,
more
right?
people. Yes.
You know when somebody's waiting for a question in the world. Like, do you get an alert when somebody walks in?
Yeah, so we can see that you're in there, but if we're the broker on duty for the day, we're standing there, we can see you in front of us. If we're on a phone call and we can either see you in front of us, or if you type in that box, hey, I'm waiting, need to talk to somebody, even when you leave, that comment's still there. So then we could reach out to you and say, hey, were you in the broker room?
Or they can, if they know that another managing broker's in that room, they can message, hey, can you come out and help Susan, because she's been standing here a few minutes and I'm helping another agent. So we kind of work together, and there's usually 2 or 3 of us in the world at the same time. So we really leverage to help the agents. There have been times, but we do our best to make sure everybody's taken care of.
Because at one time there was a sign that said, "We don't know you're here till you walk in. You would prefer us not to walk in." your office?"
That was contract compliance when
Okay.
Diana and I were sitting in our office.
Okay.
When you go into an office, we won't know you're there unless you walk in. So if there's nobody on the broker floor, but someone is sitting in their office and their door is open, walk in at your own risk. And please keep whatever you hear in that room, you know, because sometimes we'll have our mic off and you'll hear a dirty word.
Yelling at the kids.
No, I never. Yeah, or yelling at kids, barking dogs. Mostly barking dogs during the day when our kids are at school. But yeah, the best thing to do is if you see a broker in their office, would be to work chat them and say, "Hey, I'm standing outside your office. Do you have a minute?" Because they could be sitting in there and not even at the desk. The broker on duty room. So when you first come in, that broker in duty room has a schedule up on the wall. We probably need to go in and update that. But you could take a peek and see who's supposed to be the broker on duty. And 9 times out of 10, there are going to be times that we have to pop out. If no one is there and we have broker on duty hours, someone is available somewhere in the world. We've just had to pop to another department or pop to a meeting. We've been holding a lot of mini training sessions and doing a lot of cross training with all the broker in charges. We have 10 now. So, you know, if someone needs to know how to do something, I'll be like, "Hey guys, pop over here and let's just, you know, knock this out for 30 minutes. The floor is slow. Let's, you know, pop in here and do this." So then everybody will pop over and we'll have a quick meeting, or I'll say, "Okay, 30-minute meeting tomorrow." They're trying to put up Post-it notes while they're gone, but if they forget, just send somebody a work chat and say, "Hey, is somebody in the world?" and we'll figure it out. So I just wanted to kind of address that. And that's really it. So does anyone have any questions? We have 2 managing brokers here, standing here. We have 15 minutes. Woo! 15 minutes, but if you guys have any questions about anything, whether it's contract compliance or anything else, you have us here, utilize us for those 15 minutes.
Can I get your help, maybe
Yep.
offline, about the mentor
Yep.
personal sale?
Yep.
That works.
I forwarded your email to April.
Okay.
Online, so I saw that you sent that across. April is
She's
payment
payment
processing.
process.
Because somebody told me that, you know, with personal sale, you have to do it for a certain percentage.
A certain percentage of what?
Expand and.
Yeah, you're good.
I
They
didn't
sent us
understand
anything.
that.
All right, we will stop sharing.
I've asked
here.
twice and they got
Not for
the same guy.
personal sale though.
Yeah.
It's
Well, a personal sale depends on your mentor. Your mentor, at your mentor's discretion, you waive the mentor part of that, but not the expand part of that.
Oh, no, I don't want to waive that. I really prefer
Thanks, meeting.
expand.
Oh, no, you have to
I
pay
don't
expand
understand what